The Secrets of Middle-earth is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
You're listening to The Secrets of Middle-earth, where we discuss the hidden themes and deeper layers found in the works of J.R.R. Tolkien, whether in his writings or in any of the media derived from them. I'm Jeff Haecker, and joining me today on the panel are Thomas Salerno. Hey, Thomas.
Hey there, Jeff.
And Mike Schramm. Welcome back, Mike.
Hey, Jeff. Hey, Thomas. Good to be back.
Awesome. And be sure to follow The Secrets of Middle-earth in Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, Spotify, or any podcast directory or app. And you can find us on social media at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia or on Twitter, where we are at SQPN, or on Instagram. We are at StarQuest Network. And don't forget, you can get your own official Secrets of Middle-earth merch, including our awesome t-shirt at sqpn.com/merch. It's a great way for you to support the show and show your love for Tolkien and his wonderful world of Middle-earth. And if you haven't seen it in a while, it's the 4 races of Middle-earth, and it has the Hail Mary in
Tengwar script. Yeah.
So it's a very cool shirt. You can get a variety of colors and combinations. But for today, we are going to be discussing the upcoming Season 2 of Rings of Power, which will premiere August 29th, I believe, with 3 episodes.
3-episode premiere.
Which is one more than the last season. So, but before we get there, I just thought we should discuss a little news that they showed 20 minutes of the War of Rohirrim at the Annecy Film Festival, and it premiered to applause from what I saw. So that seems like a good sign for that upcoming film. And for our listeners, if you're not familiar, that's the upcoming anime style film about Helm Hammerhand.
Loved those screenshots that they shared.
There's some screenshots too that you can see it looks really cool, and it has Miranda Otto, who was Eowyn from the movies, who will be I guess like narrating or kind of probably introing the film. So but I believe it comes out December 13th or 14th, I'm assuming whatever that Thursday, Friday is of that week.
Is the premise going to be like her telling the story to a child in Rohan or something?
It could be. Yeah.
Is that, I mean, it would make sense. So
yeah, or kind of like how Galadriel in Lord of the Rings, the movies, she kind of intros, gives you kind of the background. So it could be something like that. Or
she could be telling the story to like her son with Faramir.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I hope it is sort of like a Princess Bride scenario where she's like reading the story to the kid, trying to get him to go to sleep or something.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, but that's something to look forward to later this year. But before that, as I said, the topic for tonight is Rings of Power Season 2. And at this point, the teaser trailer has dropped about a month and a half ago. The full trailer has not. So I'm knowing our luck, it'll drop, while we're recording this or something, something silly. But just to kind of recap where we were at the end of the first season, and we'll get Mike's take on it, the season as a whole, in a minute. It ended with
it's a lot of pressure.
It's the Southlands being turned into Mordor, and Sauron, Halbrand, or Sauron as he's now known, arriving there. Numenor's forces were kind of near that area still. The Elven Rings had been forged, and the Balrog awakened in Moria, or Khazad-dûm as it's still known at this point. And Nori Harfoot, I forget her actual last name, but Nori was one of the
Brandyfoot.
Brandyfoot, okay.
Yeah.
And the Stranger are off on an adventure. So it's kind of where we were at with the season. I mean, just very basic touch points. We can go deeper at a later point as well. But since Thomas and I had a whole 7 or 8 weeks of discussing it, but Mike joined us later. What are your feelings on the season, Mike, or on the show as a whole so far?
I mean, so I was thinking about, that question overall. And one of the things that I have to kind of grapple with in myself is there isn't the same level of like emotional attachment that I think you'll sometimes find, which almost sounds like, well, geez, what am I doing on the show or whatever? I mean, I still obviously like appreciate the artistry of the the stories in general, right? And I mean, when Thomas talked to me about doing this, I was thinking in terms of more like the books themselves. Obviously, it wasn't a Rings of Power podcast. It's Lord of the Rings or Middle Earth podcast. But I appreciate it. I appreciate the stories on that sort of level. But it wasn't like this, if they don't do it exactly to, the picture in my head or exactly the way that I see the story playing out, or if this person isn't doing this or saying this at this time, then I'm going to, hate the show or whatever. I was just like, well, I mean, I can watch it or appreciate it in the same way that let's just say you took the Lord of the Rings part out of it and you just said this was going to be a high fantasy or fantasy kind of epic show. I mean, like if you've watched any of the other really, really popular ones in the last 10, 15 years, right? Which we don't have to name or whatever, but there's been plenty of those.
House of the Dragon.
Yeah. Oh, or Game of Thrones or whatever. But so it's like, well, what if I was just watching it without any of that sort of baggage? And it was fine, I guess. I don't know. It was like, it was fine. Like I was thinking to myself, like, okay, who's the character that I, really attach to or really associate with? And it's like, I mean, was there one that stood out where it's like, oh, I'm really rooting for this person, or this storyline is really interesting? And I was thinking, as you were kind of discussing the trailer for season 2, I was like, okay, so I mean, I think everybody's favorite, and this kind of came up in one of the episodes that I did last, it was like end of summer, or maybe it came out in fall, but the Elrond and oh gosh, now I'm
Durin.
This is and the Elrond Durin friendship, right? Which, I mean, in some ways it is supposed to remind you of the Legolas Gimli kind of dynamic, which of course is fun from the Peter Jackson movies and stuff. So that would probably be the one where it's like, oh, is that the most fun to watch, like when those scenes came on? But that wasn't like, I mean, maybe some episodes it was like 25 out of the 40 minutes or 40 out of the 60 minutes or whatever it was, but it wasn't like, then okay, so then I am sitting around like waiting for this character arc to kind of get over or whatever. I mean, it was fun watching the Galadriel part and obviously the big mystery at the time of who's going to turn out to be Sauron and stuff. And I think one of the things too that, and Amazon's obviously going to capitalize on this, is the callbacks to the and we'll kind of talk about this when we go through the trailer, right? But the callbacks to the movies, where it's like, there's that scene where you see one of the men take the ring, and you're like, oh, I wonder if we're going to get to see him become a ring wraith. And it's like, we see that in the trailer for season 2. So it's like, oh, that would be a cool storyline to follow, is how did the race of, or these 9 men who get the 9 rings become the ring wraiths? Like, are we going to see that sort of corruption take place in this season? Right. And I think, is it only going to be 5 seasons total? I don't know.
I think they've announced 5.
I think it's been renewed for season 2 and 3, but I don't think 4 and 5 have been ordered yet. But I think their kind of plan was 5 overall.
Yeah.
And so like when it, maybe after a lot of the world building has kind of happened in season 1, and some of those dominoes will start to fall a little bit more, kind of like the final episode of season 1, where it's like, oh gosh, okay, here's where the elven rings were made. It's like, I remember, it's like the meme where you point at the screen. It's like, oh, I remember that.
Exactly.
So am I going to be a sucker for those moments? There's probably going to happen a lot more in season 2, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
And then it's just going to snowball, right? All the way until presumably the end of the series, whenever, I think, like I said, I thought it was 5, but anyway, so anyway, going back to, what did I think of it? Or I mean, it was one of those where I think they're hoping that this is going to be sort of like a slow burn, kind of slow buildup, right? And I don't maybe get into the action sequences as much as I did when I was, 10 or 12 years old or something. And so those aren't going to be the things where it's like, oh, this is, this was so entertaining because it was a hour-long battle scene. But like I said, if it can start to kind of tap into the big sort of romantic ideas that I loved thinking about when I read the Lord of the Rings series, or the Silmarillion especially. Like, if I had to pick one single, like, Silmarillion is probably, especially because it's almost like a collection of short stories. So you can almost like digest, like you can just get one in a read one in an hour and then really just digest it, as opposed to this big daunting, like, oh, I've got 1,000 pages to get through the entire story sort of thing. So that will be, so that's what I enjoyed, is getting those sorts of moments. And when it's sort of like, and sometimes you'd have a character say something where I'd have to be like, okay, that doesn't sound like the whole, like, you have to touch the dark to see you remember that line at the end of Galadriel's brother said, like, you have to
says it.
touch the dark. And I was like, that just feels weird. Like, that felt weird, And so hopefully there aren't any, like, a lot more of those where it's like, they're kind of like, is this really a thing Tolkien would say or a thing Tolkien would write? Because that kind of threw me when those things happen. But I feel like this is a long way of not answering the question. The question is like, it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, I think we kind of settled on, if you look at this as fan fiction, you can this isn't, Tolkien's not behind the camera making this or writing this. It's fan fiction, and if you view it that way, I enjoyed the first season overall. With some of the storylines I didn't like as much, but yeah, I think overall we kind of as a panel just kind of said, well, it's fan fiction, and if you
it's fine.
You can enjoy it at that aspect.
I was
like,
honestly,
it sounds like a backhanded criticism, to be honest, but it's it is fine. It's fine.
It does not deserve the opprobrium and like vitriolic hate that it gets. I don't think.
No, I think that's just the same thing we're seeing now with like the acolyte with Star Wars. Yeah. There's always some portion of a fan base of something that's. It's not going to match exactly what they want it to be, so that's they're not looking at it on its own merits. But
it's like, I remember getting but before we recorded our episodes on season 1, I was getting hate mail from people who knew that I was going to be reviewing the show, and it's like, how dare you review this show? By reviewing the show, you are de facto supporting the evil Amazon. And I'm like, wow. Okay. I'm like, tempers are running a little high here. But honestly, like, I was surprised by how much I enjoyed season 1, because I did go in with I was terrified. I was terrified that I was going to hate the show. But it's like, I was, except for those first 2 episodes, which I really didn't care for. Like, starting with episode 3 and the Numenor stuff, I was pretty much entertained the rest of the way,
Yeah, I think for me too, the Numenor stuff was probably the strongest.
I love Elendil,
or at least one of the most. Elendil, one of the most interesting things. And like you said, Mike, the Durin Elrond friendship, that was one of the highlights as well, and Disa, his Durin's wife.
Yeah,
those were all great.
And I liked Arondir. The original character.
And I think this gets a lot of eye rolls too when people talk about like the lore of Mithril. Remember that episode?
That was
and like even if it was maybe fumbled in the execution, like I think the spirit is maybe like is positive or is there in terms of, well, this is obviously been a really, really cool thing throughout The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, and so who wouldn't want to kind of turn over that stone or I mean, pun intended, dig deeper when it comes to that mystery, right? I mean, not too greedily, but dig a little deeper when it comes to
yeah. But they also they also hedge their bets, because they tell us in the dialogue that, that story about the origin of Mithril is apocryphal. Like, they even use that word. So it's like, it may not be true. So I don't know. And if it turns
some like historical critical dwarves, like the historical critical method when it comes to the dwarf lore and stuff, to the Mithril story. They need to do like the Mithril seminar. Maybe you could do the Mithril seminar out there.
We could probably have a whole seminar just on Mithril.
Yeah.
Well, before we go further, I do want to ask Mike, when did you did you figure out Halbrand was Sauron? And if you did, when did you figure it out? I think for me, I was on, there's no way because just various things in the show, I was like, there's no way he's Sauron, because he was acting like Halbrand when he was alone and stuff like that. And so I was like, but then kind of when he said, it's a gift, I said, okay.
Yeah, that was the moment. I remember my brother and I looked at each other like, and I was like, no way.
Like he's doing the Boromir thing.
Yeah.
So in general, like whenever I watch a sort of, whether it's a mystery, TV episode or movie or whatever, I don't even bother trying when it comes to like figuring it out, because maybe it's partially to like save face or whatever, because then I don't have to ever say that I'm wrong. So it was just something where it's like, I'm just going to let it happen, right? I'm going to let the story happen or let it be revealed to me. And then, and obviously like if I pick up on a clue, then great or something. I think usually though, and I was watching it with my wife, and she said it before that moment, but I can't remember exactly when. And I probably gave her a look like, what? Come on. But then, obviously it turned out to be true. So, yeah, like I said, it probably wasn't before that moment where it was like, oh, it's obvious now or something. But like I said, that's just kind of in general how I approach the quote unquote mysteries of, different TV shows and stuff.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of that mystery, I thought before we jump into the trailer, what do y'all think on the Stranger, the Gandalf, potentially actual Gandalf wizard character? Do you think it's Gandalf, or do you think it's? I tend to think. I mean, they're kind of leading us that way, so I don't know if it's too obvious. So I feel like I was when we, maybe it was like a what was it called, like a patron question. I remember that came up, and I remember kind of thinking about it or talking about it, and I thought it was like when they did the follow your nose thing. I was like, I feel like they're trying to make it like that. When he said it was like his last line in the season. I think it was. Yeah, I think so.
So I think they're trying to square it up with like how Gandalf was already so familiar or so friendly with hobbits by the time he gets to Bilbo and the Hobbit and Frodo in Lord of the Rings. So it feels like that's what they're trying to set up as, because the Harfoots seem like a sort of proto-Hobbit, right?
Yeah,
I mean, that's kind of the
three like Hobbit prototypes kind of things.
So that's where it would make sense. And it seems like it makes the most sense based off what we have. And it almost would feel like at this point, if they do something out of left field where it's like some other just like, not Istari, but some other just like creature of some kind, then you're like, well, where does that feels more arbitrary, right? Than just having it be Gandalf and then, almost like sucking up whatever discontinuity people are going to say because of some other thing about Gandalf's history that I don't know or something. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I think I mean, definitely Gandalf's like, on some other podcasts like say they're, he's on the cork board on your red string, murder board or whatever as one of the possibilities. But I'm still wondering if he might be one of the blue wizards that we don't really know much about.
And I think when we talked about this too, it was like, but aren't they, I mean, and maybe you just create this picture in your head of like, they're supposed to be together, but because they're always mentioned together. And like I said, maybe this is reading too much into the, into like the very few references we have. Yeah. But the fact but it's almost like when you're reading like a biblical text and they always have like the characters show up in pairs, or they always have this person named with this person. It feels weird to kind of say, well, this person was alone this time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm not even sure they have the rights to use the Blue Wizard, because I'm not sure if they're even mentioned because they just have
to say like the Azure wise ones. They just have to like do a look around like that.
Yeah, but but I feel like then at that point just make it Gandalf. And
no, exactly. It just seems simpler, and it seems like continuity, or not continuity wise, but almost like familiarity wise, because they are so clearly going for all this fan service already. Yeah. And it's like, just make it Gandalf and make it a fan service thing, right? And that's where the follow your nose line, that was like, that's where that reference, it felt like it was a fan service.
I was probably, and this is going to sound like it's cheap, but like 50-50, he's either Gandalf or he's one of the Blue Wizards, until the Tom Bombadil reveal kind of tipped me over, because Gandalf is familiar with Tom. He knows about him, and at the end of the Lord of the Rings, in the books anyway, he goes and he has that essentially 2-year like sleepover with Tom Bombadil and Goldberry. So like, I'm like, okay, they're
like your unmarried friend who crashes on your couch. Like,
exactly, that's
Gandalf. So we get to see Gandalf in his like, very early post college years, where he's just like, backpacking around Middle Earth or something.
So I think that they're trying to establish that relationship kind of early on. It's like, okay, so how does he know Tom and where does he know him from? And so, yeah, and especially with him palling around with hobbits, my other out there kind of left field theory that I've heard, and I wouldn't mind if it turned out to be true, is that he's Saruman.
Oh, that'd really be something.
Yeah, right. Or it's like, he has a dark turn later on or something like that, or something happens that plants that a kind of dark seed in him or something like that.
How because I mean there's always been this thing of like Frodo, Gandalf, and Aragorn are like the Christ figures as the priest, the prophet, and the king, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's a very common thing. And there's always the and again, this is sort of like historical criticism, Jesus seminar sort of stuff, where Jesus had to discover that he was the Messiah. And it's sort of like when this blue wizard comes to Middle Earth on that comet and he wakes up and he doesn't like know anything or know that's him discovering that he's this, Istari, that he's this wizard that is come to, bring this prophetic message to Middle Earth. So it's sort of, it kind of has this postmodern feel to it as well, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, I think with all that being said, we can go ahead and, we're not going to like freeze frame the trailer and discuss it image by image, but there
are other videos for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I figure we can just kind of walk through some of the highlights. And so I think we may have talked about it on a previous episode, but when the teaser came out, there was this, I think the first shot or one of the first shots is this like tentacle monster thing. And
the Venom symbiote.
Yeah. I was like
climbing up the mountain or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, it makes you think of the monster right before they go into Moria in the Lord of the Rings movie. Mm-hmm. It also, I mean, because it looked like they were in a forest. So I was like, oh, is this supposed to be like an Ungoliant or a Shelob sort of thing? Because, I mean, that's, Ungoliant was hanging out with Melkor before this sort of period in Middle Earth, and is that what they're going to try to do, or that's what I was kind of trying to figure it out as I was watching it.
I think that it will explain that blight that's on the elf trees, because it's that same sort of black stringy substance. So I feel like this creature, whatever it is the source of that infection. It will be revealed in a flashback or something like that.
Yeah, and later on in the trailer, you see the roots, or you see these like roots kind of like
tendrils,
tendrils or whatever going in. So it could be related to that. But yeah, some of the stuff I've seen online was it could be the similar or the same as the Watcher in the Water, which was outside of Moria that the Fellowship encountered. So I don't know. Yeah, there's definitely some interesting like creature stuff going on in this.
Well, then there's that one in the ocean too.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I was like, what is this a reference to? As I was kind of watching it, I was like, is there something that I, just had missed or wasn't thinking about, or is that monster mentioned in any like Silmarillion story, or even just like casually offhandedly mentioned like by Gandalf in some conversation?
There's an obscure Tolkien reference to sea monsters that I've never like encountered it, but people were talking about it during last season, because remember like the sea monster that destroys the raft and stuff.
Yeah.
The showrunners mentioned that, we pulled this obscure Tolkien sea monster reference in like, I don't know, the Lost Tales or something.
There's like some letter where he said like, I can see the monster, but he was SEE, and they just took it as like, it's like, again, it's like when they find fragments of the Gospel of John and they're like, well, we have this half of a letter, we're just going to assume it says this or something. So
yeah, but yeah, there was those two monsters were kind of interesting in this trailer, because that first season sea monster that destroyed the raft, that and Halbrand Sauron was on that raft. So like, I hope we kind of get some more backstory in that, because that's kind of just.
Oh, he should do like a Usual Suspects thing where he like explains the story, but then he turns out to be the bad guy, the Kaiser Sose all along, like.
Or like in the show Monk, he's like, okay, here's what happened. And
I'm still not entirely unconvinced that all those other people on the raft were an illusion.
It's very
cast
possible
by Sauron.
At this point, you could always just kind of say that, right? You could fall back to that. So,
or Galadriel's just been dreaming this whole time.
Season 1 was like a protracted nightmare.
But yeah,
she was looking into that. She was looking into that pool, that she looks in with Frodo in the first one.
Or like the when she looks in the Palantir. Imagine that, like, when everything after she looks in the Palantir in that one episode like never happened or something like that.
Oh, it'd be a big middle finger from the writers, wouldn't it? But honestly, I could get a kick out of that if that happens at some point. I would, because like I said, I don't have that emotional investment where I can laugh if something like that happens, but I can see why people would be upset.
I was able to like detach myself from it because I'm like, okay, this is essentially an alternate universe. It's not overwriting or rewriting anything that Tolkien wrote or said. But so why get upset about it?
But even that, isn't that a little almost like it? I would feel disingenuous by just saying there's like some multiverse, like Tolkien multiverse, because it's like we want this coherency though, right?
I'm not saying that. That's just how I compartmentalize it in my mind.
Well, I kind of think of it as
it's a coping strategy, Thomas. Is that one of the coping strategies that when you take a creative writing class and they're like, yep, and now your heroes are going to be, they're going to tear down your heroes, they're going to tear down your favorite works, and you just have to compartmentalize it.
But I don't feel like it's tearing it down. That's the thing, I'm just like, people get upset by like the so-called deviations from canon, and I'm just like, I'm just taking this as an alternate retelling. That's all, I kind of combine
the Rings of Power with the Peter Jackson films, which I love. I love the Lord of the Rings movies. And
so this would actually make we were joking about the in the War of the Rohirrim where it was Éowyn telling the story like to her kid or whatever, like that's the premise. And I was saying, just like back in the old days, in the prehistory days where they would retell the story of the Iliad until it eventually got written down, it could have these little deviations and details and stuff. And so what if, this is just people sitting around the campfire and this is their version of the Iliad or their version of the Second Age that they're telling.
Yeah, right? And a lot of these events we don't know from this like Second Age. There's not a whole lot in the Silmarillion about the Second Age. There's a lot of First Age and Third Age, but not as much. Well, Third Age is more.
The bare skeleton of these events is there,
right?
And so there's a lot that they can do where it's like filling it out essentially.
Yeah, but moving on in the trailer, there's a scene of. Galadriel and her friends kind of surrounded by these, like, they're kind of in like it's almost like a fog, and they're kind of all like back to back ready to fight.
There again, wasn't that a callback to Mines of Moria when like all the goblins are closing in,
Yeah, kind of.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's not clear what they're fighting, and the obvious answer or more easiest answer would be orcs, but it could be anything. It could be humans of some sort or some other kind of creatures or
monsters,
because like I said, we've seen several different like monster type things in this in the season 1, and then so far in the trailer there's a lot, because this is a teaser trailer, so there's a lot more of like, here's an image and here's another one, and it's just like
everything's out of context,
right? And even a full trailer, whenever we get that, will be as well, but this is definitely like it's even more out of context. But yeah, there's just like that. They're kind of at back-to-back fighting, and it kind of calls back to the season 1. I think it was the premiere when Galadriel was kind of on the hunt for Sauron, and her group was like fighting in that.
It was like that ice monster or ice troll.
Yeah, they like went to the ice fortress. But yeah, similar to that, but this time it looks like Elrond is there, and it's hard to see some of the other characters, so I'm not sure who all's.
Some other elves I don't know. Yeah, they weren't in the previous season.
Right. And then this part could be interesting to talk about. There's that whole moth or like butterfly, like cloud of butterflies in the trailer here.
Oh, that's definitely going to have the Gandalf.
Yeah, because that was a callback to season 1 as well. Like there were these moths flying around him. So that's, so. And
I think that is going to involve those female sorceresses or others of their order, I think. And it looked like it was taking place in kind of a deserty environment, so I assume it's in the east, in Rhûn, where the stranger and Nori were headed.
Yeah, because later in the trailer, in the teaser, you see like they're standing in this. There's one shot at least of like being in kind of a desert environment, or at least like it doesn't look like anything we've seen in Middle Earth, because we've seen either like forests or mountains or or water, or cities. There's not really, hasn't really been like a desert or anything like that. So
I mean, yeah, aside from like the sort of ash desert of Mordor, like not your like traditional sort of,
right, because
scrubland desert,
because in the east isn't really described much. Rune is the area we're talking about where the blue wizards went, which is why there's speculation that that's who the stranger is, because he and Nori are going east. So it's possible that they're blue wizards because of that. So,
is she going to be the second? Is she going to be trained as a blue wizard and
I was just thinking
realize that the real history were the friends we made along the way is what it's going to turn out to be. That's going to be their storyline. I heard you. It sounds like you like that idea, Thomas.
No.
That was a groan of disgust. I can't believe it.
Yeah. And then the next shot is we talked about earlier, the roots. You kind of see these like roots growing quickly on the forest floor.
Yeah, and there's that voiceover that says, and I assume it's talking about Sauron. He says he worms his way inside your mind. Yeah, and then throughout this, you're seeing, or I think at this point throughout it, you're seeing like an image of Sauron in kind of his Anatar form, which is an elven form he takes, when he's going to forge the ring. So, but he still looks like Halbrand. So I'm curious to see how, like, are they going to recognize him, or is he going to be, different enough that they, like, are elves just not going to be, or are they face blind to humans, and they're going to all humans look the same?
Oh, if that line comes up, I'm going to laugh if that comes up.
Yeah.
But he does kind of look, when they've shown in the shots, he does look, very similar, just with
I mean, it fooled me when I watched the trailer for the first time.
Oh, really?
I went through that cognitive dissonance thing where it's like, I'm like, hey, the new Sauron actor, they got a guy who looks very much like Charlie Vickers. And then I'm like, oh, wait, that is him.
Oh, it's the same guy. He just shaved, right?
He shaved
and the long locks. Yeah.
It just goes to show it's like, growing a beard is the same on men as makeup is on women. It's the same. You just don't even recognize it.
Or it's like the Clark Kent with the
Superman
glasses.
taking off the
glasses and changing his posture a little bit.
Yeah.
We were talking about recently on the secrets of movies and TV shows where like when Christopher Reeves would walk, across the lot dressed as Clark Kent, nobody would recognize him as the actor who played Superman.
Oh, really?
But when he was dressed as Superman, of course, everybody recognized him. But once he was in his Clark Kent getup, people passed him as if he was just a nobody. So I'm like, I guess it works in real life.
Yeah, but in real life, if that was happening, that's one thing that's I always kind of headcanon, like, oh, he's got some kind of like mental projection that he's like some kind of thing. He's like how the Flash can like blur his face a little bit or something.
But the thing is, Sauron can actually do that.
Yeah, because Sauron's a shapeshifter. And speaking of Sauron, kind of the next shot is I was kind of hard. I had to kind of look up what this was, because at first you see kind of this glowing thing and someone looking at it, and they've talked about that we might see a version of the Ainulindale or creation in this. So at first I was kind of thinking that's what it was, but from what I've seen, people are saying, oh, that's Celebrimbor looking at the forge. And
really?
A figure. Yeah, that's what, at least that's what some people have said. But again, these are just like images from the trailer.
Are you talking about the one where it's supposed to kind of look like the eye? Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I interpreted that as like, because when he's Anatar, he's in an elvish form, but he's in Tolkien's writings, he's passing himself off as a Maya from Valinor. Okay. And that sort of eye-looking slit kind of opening reminded me of when in that first episode where Galadriel's going to Valinor and the clouds part and there's that bright light that comes out. I thought they were trying to call back to that. And, like Halbrand's going to walk out and say, like, I come from Valinor. And maybe that's how he deceives everybody. He's just like, oh, you thought I was just this Halbrand guy, but actually, because Galadriel didn't really. The only person she told about Halbrand's secret identity was Elrond.
Yeah.
So the others don't know about that yet, presumably.
Right. So yeah, we just have to hope that Galadriel doesn't go back to Eragion to.
You have one job, Galadriel. Warn everybody.
Or Elrond, I guess.
Yeah.
Because did Elrond saw Halbrand, right?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, I didn't have. I've been waiting till it gets closer to go back and rewatch the whole series, the whole season. But, and then after that is that sea monster that we were discussing. It looks like a giant shark with a big pointed nose, and there's someone kind of floating in front of it.
Looks like a goblin shark. Have you ever seen one of those?
Yeah. Oh yeah. But it looks like it might have tentacles too, so it might be like some kind of like shark squid or sharktopus, which or something.
I've already seen that movie. Yeah. I've seen that movie. Yeah.
Or some kind of like kraken or something. Some kind of crazy monster. So that could be interesting.
Some fell beast is that?
Yeah, because there's a lot we don't know about like the deep water, like what the kind of creatures and things that are there.
Even Gandalf says that in the books. He's like, you don't know what's down, because when somebody at the council is like, let's just throw the ring in the ocean, and Gandalf's like, that's a terrible idea. You don't know what's down there.
Yeah. And then we go on to see what looks like Khazad-dûm being destroyed or being wrecked.
Some rocks fall, I guess.
Yeah, because
that's going to be a planned demolition.
That's right. Because at the end of season 1, we see the Balrog kind of waking up because they're starting to mine the Mithril, Durin, or I think at that point Durin had been kind of disowned by his dad, but they've already kind of like gone a little bit too deep and too greedy to get the Mithril, and it's going to lead to waking up a Balrog.
That leaf that falls down there wakes it up.
Yeah. Yeah,
that's all it takes, I guess. It's like a young child. It doesn't take much.
Yeah. Loud noises and mining won't wake him up, but then the smallest.
Just the slight shift of your weight when you're holding it in your arms.
So Balrogs are basically giant babies that breathe fire.
I mean, they throw tantrums. That's
a hot take. That is
So if any Tolkien fans are out there and how about to have a kid?
Yeah.
That's what it's like.
It's a good name for a boy or a girl, right?
Yeah.
That's the.
They could sell like little baby like onesie things that say like Durin's Bane on it.
But does it have wings attached to it? Is the question.
Does it have wings attached to it? Or even better, like the Nameless Terror.
Oh, yeah. I'm excited.
You can tell I'm the one that doesn't have kids here.
My kids can be terrors, but they have names, so that's quite.
Yeah, it doesn't quite work.
No, that's when you're so flustered and you yell at them that you can't remember their names, so you just like and that's when they're the nameless terrors. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, but I'm excited to see more of the Khazad-dûm and the dwarves, because that was, I think, one of the at least for me, one of the more interesting parts of season 1 was kind of seeing that, because in Lord of the Rings we got a lot of elves, but we really didn't get a lot of dwarves in the films, and even in the book we didn't get a lot of dwarves. You obviously get more
Gimli.
and then you obviously get more in the Hobbit, both book and movie. But
will Durin challenge the Balrog to a rock breaking contest? That's I think the question that's probably going to be like the climax of season 2 is they're going to have play some rock music in the background. Yes, pun intended, and they'll have that little contest. So
could be. We'll see. But and then that kind of leads into, you see a dwarf, you see King Durin, so Durin's father, or I think is his father Durin.
That's one of the
Durin
like continuity like goofs, because they're only supposed to be named Durin for like special reasons. Like you essentially can't have two Durins existing at any one time, because they're supposed to be reincarnations of the previous
Durin Emeritus, and then
Durin Emeritus. Yeah,
I think that was the title. Yeah, of the older one.
Well, it's like a Sith. You have the master and the apprentice.
But we see Durin the Elder kind of with that giant ring that he has. So I assume that's Durin's ring, which has an interesting history because even in Tolkien's writings, there's two different traditions for how that ring comes down. In the frame narrative of Tolkien's world, there's kind of two different oral traditions of how that ring comes to Durin. It's either Sauron gives it to him or Celebrimbor does. So it'll be interesting to see which tack they take. They could do both and have Sauron in disguise.
No, it's kind of like like when you write your name under the like that. Well, that was from both of us, so you just put the name underneath. You know? So that's what Celebrimbor will do. Is he'll just put his name on the card afterwards, and so they both get credit.
But the reason why the dwarves make that claim is because they don't want their greatest chieftain to have received a ring of power from Sauron. So they side more with the history where it's like, no, Celebrimbor gave. Yeah, exactly.
History going on.
Yeah,
but that makes Middle Earth such proud. But that's what makes Middle Earth such a realistic world, right? That the people in it have realistic motivations, and are proud enough to be like, let's fudge the history a little bit.
Yeah, and the dwarves in rings are interesting. The rings that Sauron forges for them, because some of them are like eaten by dragons, and some are eaten, or so some are just, or Sauron gets back. So it'd be funny to see like a dragon eating, something along those lines in the show.
And they don't turn you invisible.
Yeah,
dwarven rings. They just make you uber greedy.
And dwarves are already uber greedy.
Yeah.
Some of them are. So yeah, because I think it's kind of in the lore that the rings don't really corrupt the dwarves as much as they do men or.
They just amplify natural kind of dwarven tendencies, and that's why I've always assumed that once Durin the Third gets the Ring of Power, he's going to completely flip his previous script and is going to want to mine all the mithril, and I assume that's what wakes the Balrog, and that they're tying in the waking of the Balrog to Durin getting a Ring of Power, and that's how Sauron sort of destroys Moria and stuff like that. That's my theory anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, that would actually, that might even create a little bit of an interesting story, because it was like the younger Durin wanted to, and the dad said no. Then the dad gets this thing that makes him, like you said, it exacerbates the greed. And so then it sort of flips the conflict on its head, because now they're still fighting. But then it also fits with the kind of, I guess, millennial and post-millennial narrative of like our older generations are ruining everything for us. And so it can still have the dad be the bad guy, right? and have him be the one who actually delves too greedily and too deep. And then the son has to kind of deal with the fallout, with the consequences, right? So it all sort of falls together a little bit.
I felt like the elder Durin was a bit inconsistent to begin with, because he's the guy who's like, who flips out during their final conversation together, and he's like, how dare you bring your mother into this? And I'm like, dude, you were the one who first brought it up. Durin the Third is the one who talks about how me and your mother didn't think you would survive the first few months, and then later when his son brings up his mother, the dad blows his stack, and I'm like, you're not a very consistent person.
It's only okay when I say that.
Yeah, it's only okay when I bring up your mother, but not you. And I'm like, what's going on here? That's kind of an interesting, I hope they delve deeper into the dwarven character. Delve deeper. That was
I wasn't going to say it, so.
Yeah. I noticed it right after I said it.
Yeah, but it'll be cool to see more dwarves, and I mean, cool until some bad things happen to them, because I don't know I'm curious to see if we'll see, like, if the season will end kind of with the destruction of Khazad-dûm, or
I hope they have a character where they show the person like die right next to that well, so then their head like falls back, so then the skeleton is in the perfect position for when like if they have that's again, it's just a total fan service thing, but it'd be so great if they had like a person have this big dramatic, and I was trying to guess based off the skeleton, the height, was it a goblin that died there? And so is that whose skeleton where the skull falls in to the well? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but was that one of those dwarves, or was that one of the ones from
Balin's company.
Balin's group? Because Balin's company went to Moria.
It had Balin's book, so I assumed it was one of the later.
Because this is thousands and thousands of years before Lord of the Rings. So
it would be an interesting visual nod regardless, though.
Yeah. Well, like I said, they're doing all these things that are supposed to just be like hints at it. Like even the scene of the camera like swooping in on them in that circle where the darkness is closing in. Like that's almost shot for shot the same as when the Fellowship is in Moria, you know? And so obviously it's a different context and stuff, but they're trying to have these little like visual callbacks and stuff too. But
yeah. And then one of the other interesting shots is we see eagles. We see the giant eagles, and
yes,
who I guess our Farazan is riding one. Or
I didn't. Everyone was saying that. I did not get that at all. I saw an eagle is swooping in, and it comes up behind where because I assumed that Farazan was already standing on that balcony when the eagle swoops in, and everyone was like, "Oh, he's riding an eagle." I'm like, what?
Yeah, I'd have to like go back and like quickly pause and play to see kind of how that plays out. But because when I first saw the teaser, I thought, is this like a griffin or something? You know, because I just wasn't even thinking of the eagles being in this. But
well, they have a still of the eagles in like one of the first shots in season 1. Remember when they're fighting? They're fighting like they're not fighting Nazgul, are they? They're fighting some other.
It was either a fell beast or like a winged dragon
during like
or something.
During like the intro when Galadriel's like
she's doing giving the I guess context or something.
Yeah, the voiceover.
Yeah, so I just wasn't even thinking about them being like a possibility or active in.
Well, they live on Numenor in the Second Age writings, and they're kind of like the eyes and ears of both the Iluvatar and the Valar, the way they're presented in the Second Age stuff. And it's when they leave Numenor that it's supposed to be a signal to the Numenorians. Okay, you've displeased the Valar, you know. So I wonder if like this eagle is if it's one of the talking eagles, if we're actually going to get to see an eagle talk in live action Middle Earth stuff, because we have not. In the Peter Jackson movies, they don't talk. But it would be interesting if it's like a messenger of Manwë or something, and it's come from Valinor, and it's there to tell the Numenorians, hey, you're straying from the path. Why don't you know?
Telling Farazan, don't marry your cousin. It's
please don't. Yeah.
Well, because that was one thing I was thinking of that I don't know if we'll see it this season, because I have a little bit of speculation for after we get through the trailer. But yeah, that is the thing that Farazan, he was the I guess the prime minister of Numenor.
Yeah.
When the king was dying in the last season. Or kind of on his, in his deathbed or sickbed or whatever, he was kind of the one speaking for the king and kind of the leader of Numenor, basically. But then, but Queen Muriel is still there, so yeah, it'll be interesting and to see how that plays out, because she's kind of like a strong queen, so it's like, what's going to lead her to?
Well, I have a theory about that, because at least how she's sidelined. I was just reading a book on medieval history in which they said that during medieval times, a blind person was not allowed to be the ruler of a country, whether king or ruling queen. Blind people were disqualified. So even if you were like the heir to the throne, or if you were reigning as king, if you became blind, that was pretty much it for your rule. So I wonder if they will. I know this isn't technically the Middle Ages in the frame narrative. This takes place thousands of years before, but I wonder if they'll kind of work that in. If Farazan will say, hey, in this obscure Numenorian law, it says that a blind person.
Well, no, and obviously, like in medieval like structure government, they would have been much more closely connected to whether it's the ancient mythology that had some like negative association with blindness or ruling in blindness, and that's what you're trying to kind of illustrate, is that Tolkien obviously is drawing from that world as well, or drawing from that mindset. It's not even so much a medieval thing as it is just a like mythological sort of thing. And so that it would make sense that would be pulled in this sort of context too. I mean, it would probably come off really weird and like obviously not like PC and probably be bad optics for them to like actually say that, unless they dress it up in some sort of like, well, according to this myth, you can't do this or whatever. But I mean, like you said, it would fit the entire kind of mythos of just the way that Tolkien wrote Lord of the Rings and all that.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the theories or speculations I had about the Queen is, in a lot of fantasy literature, I feel like if you're a blind person, there's often like a seer aspect to a lot of blind characters.
Yeah.
Like they're
like the blind oracle sort of. I mean, isn't that sort of an Iliad sort of
right? And so it could be something. So yeah, her becoming blind, she could be like, you're no longer qualified to be the ruler or, to govern, but you have this kind of religious leader aspect, and, maybe Farazan kind of makes her a deal. Cause I think in the actual Silmarillion, she's a lot younger, than him. And that's kind of why he can do, why he can do what he did and marry her, kind of like force marry her. But it could be more of like, he kind of persuades her, well, you can't rule, but I can, and I'll have your best interests. And, the people need both of us to, Numenor needs both of us. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see, because
I feel like, again, it's not PC to have him marry his cousin. So I feel like he'll finagle a kind of co-regency with her is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, but we'll see what happens there. But yeah, the Numenor stuff is like, that was one of the most interesting things, and like actually seeing Numenor and going there was awesome. And
even the little things about how you can see the architecture of the city is slowly evolving from a more elven style of architecture to a more, very Greco-Roman style. And you can even see in the background where earlier elven style architecture is being bricked over by newer Numenorian architecture.
Those are the next series of books that need to be written. Are there's the Impressionist Elven Age and then the Post-Impressionist Elven Age of like art and architecture. If some like that's going to be the real Tolkien Middle Earth fans are the ones who are going to write those books.
Or someone finds a manuscript and it was Tolkien's, he wrote a treatise on the architecture of elves.
I'll bet it exists.
I'm sure it does. Yeah, and then the next part is, we kind of already talked about the stranger Gandalf or whoever he is in kind of a desert area, but we see him like, it's like it looks like he's by a well, because I have some images up here. And he's like, he looks like he might be kind of casting a spell or like in some kind of fight or something. So
there's like a sandstorm or something like that. Unless that's the spell. He's just, I cast sand or whatever. I don't know how D&D spells work. But.
I was about to say, you're the D&D guy, Thomas, but apparently not.
No, I'm not.
That's our other Thomas.
Who says that? Who said that?
That's our other former panelist, Thomas Sanders.
Oh, yes. My fellow blue wizard, because we're both Thomas. Yeah.
But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I keep saying that, but I mean, I'm definitely excited to see like what happens with this show, and because there's a lot of neat, cool things. And then from there we see it looks like Celebrimbor getting captured, or we see the rings being collected. Mm-hmm. And if you've read the Silmarillion, Celebrimbor doesn't live happily ever after.
No.
None of the elves do in Silmarillion.
Yeah, I mean, are we actually going to see him impaled on a stake? The way it is in the books. But they also sort of try to capture Anatar / Sauron, and he appears to take control. He does this hand flip thing where I assume he's going to take control of his guards and have them murder one another.
Yeah. And because there's also some behind the scenes stuff, and there's a line in that where Celebrimbor tells Galadriel, "I've had an unexpected visitor," and
but we're given no context for that. So
right, so that could be how she's been gone from Eregion, and then Anatar's there doing stuff, and then she comes back and Celebrimbor tells her, and then that's how she finds out it's Sauron again. Although that might be kind of repetitive if Galadriel's she's the one who has to keep being like, guys, this is Sauron, come on.
And then they're gonna have it'll just be a big black screen that says "Believe Women" on it. I think is what it'll say. Well, that's what it'll get political because
but yeah, so it'll be cool to see what happens with that, and because in the Silmarillion, of course, Anatar eventually gets taken to Numenor, I
think we might even end the if we don't end the season with that. I think they say that we're gonna have a big climactic battle in this season. That's what the showrunners have said.
Probably will be Adaregion,
but I think we'll kind of end like there will be this. All will seem lost, and then like the Numenorians will appear, because we know that they're compressing the timeline so much that I think that the Battle of Eregion and the capture of Sauron and bringing to Numenor are two separate episodes in Tolkien's writings, but I think they're going to merge them into one thing.
Because I kind of have there's another part of the trailer too but just I'm kind of thinking this season, like, maybe the second to last season of the show will be the Akalabeth, basically.
The downfall. Yeah.
It'll be like that whole thing. And then the series itself will end with the last alliance to defeat Sauron. And that kind of sets up Lord of the Rings. Like, that's just kind of over. A couple of years ago, because it's been almost 2 years since this was out. I think it had here's where season 3 will end. Here's where season 2 will end. Here's where season 3, season 4. Mm-hmm. So, if I can dig that up somewhere, because I'm sure I wrote it down. But yeah, and then kind of the last part we see is a tower, and we see this.
Oh yeah.
And
are you talking about? Is it Barad-dûr? Is that?
Well, that's
I don't think so. I don't think that's what it's supposed to be. There's snow everywhere.
Yeah. Or could it be ash? Like, could it be like ash?
That's what I thought we were like, it was showing us like the progression of Mordor and like that was being built up. But
it looked a lot like that ruined fortress they go to in the first episodes of the thing where there was the ice troll there and all that stuff. And that was interesting because that was Sauron's like prototype forge where he's like messing around with, and you see that one orc skeleton like merged with the wall.
Yeah, he's like doing all kinds of his dark stuff. Experiments.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so they
evil Sith experiments, like from Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah, so we could see. I mean, it could be interesting to return to that location because that was kind of like a cool, interesting place, and so we see Sauron go back there at some, there's something he needs from there or something like for his forging in the cracks of doom or something.
Mm. Oh, and in the trailer during like some of the battle scenes, we see Adar again.
Yeah.
Played by a different actor.
Right. He's been recast. I believe by the guy who was in Game of Thrones who was last season. Was Adar, or is that the new guy? I think it's the new guy, or I think it's now someone different. Because it was the guy who played Benjen Stark, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
he's in Game of Thrones.
Yeah, so Sam Hazeldine is the new one, but Joseph Malway, who was the
So yeah, we have a new actor, and I have a few notes on the cast here for some changes and some things which we can. Because that's kind of the end of the trailer.
He's going to kind of be like a tragic figure, right? Like he was the one who he started off. Everybody thought he was going to be like this, almost like the big bad guy.
Or he was going to be Sauron,
Well, then, that was at first, right? That was where they were kind of leaning you towards, right? And then, but then, not that it's so much a redemption arc, but it's like kind of the classic bad guy thing. Yeah, I was going to say the classic bad guy thing in a lot of movies and TV shows recently, where they start to kind of humanize them, right? Or they show how they've been mistreated, and not that you kind of empathize with it. And so we're kind of at that point right now. And is he going to have a redemption where he ends up dying some heroic death for whatever? So maybe one of the humans that he was like originally subjugating or something like that. I don't know, but
yeah. So we have that recast, and then this was which we knew that a while ago, but then a more recent thing, at least to me, was that Bronwyn is leaving the show. The actress did not return for season 2. I think because I think she's Iranian. I think she went back to Iran as kind of like a political activist. So
right, yeah.
Which I mean, that's great, but I mean, it's a bummer for fans because I liked her character a lot. I thought she was really interesting.
We see in the trailer, I think, what's supposed to be her funeral pyre.
Okay.
And you see, Theo and
Arondir.
Arondir's there, and even Isildur is like in the background. So we're gonna have Arondir and Isildur kind of cross paths at some point. But yeah, and it's funny that they should have to write her out of the show so early, because especially after last season where she survives like nearly bleeding out.
Yeah.
In the big battle scene, I was almost certain she was going to die in that scene, and it's like, oh wait, I remember we were joking with, remember when we were reviewing that episode and we were joking with Caitlin, and she's like, my husband's a doctor, and he's like, yeah, there's no way you could survive that loss of blood.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's like any show, like someone gets shot in the chest, they're not, very rarely is not going to survive that, or, but they do a lot of the time in TV shows. So,
but I do like Adar as a concept and as a character, but because he's supposed to be one of those original elves that were taken and corrupted, and because he's not fully an orc, right? He has the black blood and his face is scarred and stuff, but he really doesn't look a whole lot like the other orcs, and they revere him as this father figure, that's why he's called Adar, father in Elvish. There's that meme from when if you have the captions on in the scene where Adar is revealed and the orcs all kind of bow before him, the captions say orc grunts respectfully. And that's kind of become like a meme in the fan community.
Yeah. That's like, hey, that was me at that moment. Yeah, that's me when I watched the series or whatever, reading Tolkien. Orc
respectfully.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't have any other specific like cast notes about returning or characters or your characters who won't return, but we do have a new one, which we've already kind of talked about, of Tom Bombadil will be.
Who? Hey, doll, Mary doll.
Tom Bomba Melkor, some may.
No.
I had to rage bait Thomas there.
I was gonna say you're cave trolling so hard right now.
Yeah, because that's, for those who don't know, that was one of the big like rumor or wild rumors that came out of that Tom Bombadil and Goldberry were going to be in here, but they're actually going to be Melkor and Shelob, and Melkor and Ungoliant for being punished for their crimes, so they had to like live as these random people. They
had to be like little goofballs for the rest of Middle Earth history. That's the ultimate punishment for these evil powerful beings, is they just have to be silly goofballs for which I know everybody's like really worried about, like, oh, how are you going to depict Tom Bombadil, because he's just so chaotic, I guess, or whatever, or he's just like you can't like pin him down. And I mean, that's obviously the joke. Like, even though who is Tom Bombadil, right? That's a classic Tolkien essay that goes back, I think it goes back to like 70s or 80s. Is people have kind of been exploring that question and stuff, and obviously, like, he's we want him to be a good guy, and he does good things, right? Mm-hmm. But then it brings up some of those questions of like, okay, but you're a part of this world. Like, he doesn't, where is his sense of expectation to, help in the same way that Gandalf is expected to help, or the elves are expected to help, even if it's just as a means of support for the hobbits and the men to kind of defeat evil or any of that stuff that's in the Lord of the Rings story. Because I mean, he only shows up in the Fellowship like right at the beginning of the journey. But
he saves them from the Old Man Willow and the Barrow-wights.
Yeah. And so, no, I wasn't like trying to paint this like he's totally like what do you say, chaotic neutral, where he doesn't do like any good or anything.
Yeah,
He's just like he's not like a chaos figure or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Because in some ways he and Merryweather are supposed to sort of represent like it's almost like a more idyllic like Hobbit life, right? Where it's like it's these two in the they've created cosmos out of the chaos of that woods, in creating this home and creating this hearth, right? And so it doesn't go beyond that, right? It doesn't go like he's not, he's not expanding like the men do in Middle Earth, right? And trying to almost like conquer the rest of the world. He's not doing it in an evil way like Sauron is. And he's not even reaching for the like high kind of romantic ideas of the elves and the poetry of the elves. He's just kind of like, it's almost like in Greek and Roman mythology of the god of the hearth or the goddess of the hearth, right? Is kind of the picture that they're sort of creating. And it doesn't go beyond that. But then that was the beauty of those two, the god and goddess of the hearth, is they were unaffected by the things of the quote unquote physical world, in the same way that he's not affected by the evil of the ring either. And so that's what I mean. I'm not worried about how they'll depict him, because again, it's like anything else in the series. It's like, well, we can do like, silly or chaotic characters and just sort of leave it at that. But
yeah, and I forget who he was played by.
Danny DeVito.
Jack Black.
Oh, that'd be good.
I remember that before they actually, showed the images of him, there were people saying it's going to be Jack Black.
Well, you've probably, I'm sure you've seen like on your YouTube recommendations or whatever, people will make these like, they're not AI generated, but they're fake like movie trailers. And it'll be like, if the Lord of the Rings was cast in the 90s, or if it was cast in the 2010s or something. And so it's a similar sort of idea where they'll cast like, if Beren and Luthien was cast, if they made a movie about it, who would play these parts? And similar, like you said, you can almost see the thumbnail of Jack Black in the kind of Tom Bombadil.
You can see that.
And actually, to continue with, you have the Anya Taylor-Joy as the Merryweather, right? As the
Yeah, and I did look him up. It's Rory Kinnear, who was he played in the more recent James Bond movies. He was one of the supports at MI5, and then he was also in the more recent Kingsman movie, like the prequel Kingsman movie. He was kind of I'm sorry. Maybe not. Maybe I just made that up. But he's been in a ton of stuff. But yeah, he will be Tom Bombadil in the show. So, and then the other character we kind of know, or at least it's been teased, as Curdon, the shipwright.
Oh yes, yeah.
But I don't know that I don't think they've announced casting for that. At least not that I've seen. But I'm excited for that, because Curdon is one of my favorite Legendarium characters, because he's just like, he's the oldest, one of the oldest elves, and he's kind of the last one to leave Middle Earth and to go back to Valinor. So it'll be interesting. And he's bearded. He's a bearded elf.
Elf beard, yeah.
And if he has a beard, they can get mad if he doesn't have a beard. But the fandom, if he has one, they can't say he's breaking canon.
They'll say it's not long enough, or that it's not right, or like.
Yeah. And then, just we have in our last few minutes, I didn't know if I've kind of said some of my speculation of that. I think like the second to last season will kind of be the Akalabeth, and or maybe even season 3. And then and then kind of the final season will kind of be that Lost Alliance too. And, seeing everything that kind of sets up Lord of the Rings, and that will kind of depend on what they can show or what they have the rights to. So, which I think they can do the appendices, which a lot of that is in the appendices or in the in the Akalabeth or other things. So I think they might be able to, but
they've also before like gone.
You think like the Amazon legal department has to like read over the Lord of the Rings to make sure that what they do as their
I think they do. Yeah,
they're like, I have to become a Lord of the Rings expert now to make sure that our TV show doesn't take too much from at least it's taking from this and not from that or something.
They've also gotten like specific permission to use certain things from the Tolkien estate, where they've they've gone to the Tolkien estate and say, we know this isn't in the original contract, but can we use it? And they're like, yeah, apparently they in most cases have just signed off on it. So, yeah. One thing, though, in terms of speculation for this season, or what I hope to see, they really need to answer what's up with Anarion, Isildur's brother. He's mentioned several times, and he's separated from the rest of the family. And we're given like a hint. It has to do with the circumstances around Isildur's mother's death, but we're not given much more than that. And he's, in The Last Alliance, he'll be an important character. So if they don't introduce him this season, I hope we get some more context for what's going on with, because Elendil seems pretty hurt by whatever Anarion did to kind of splinter the family. So
yeah, I've probably said this when we were covering it, but I think it sounded like his Elendil's wife might have drowned or something like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And which would be, a big blow, because obviously he's in the, I think they call it the Sea Guard.
The sea is always right. Remember?
Yeah. So, if she drowns, that's a blow, because like, what does that say about your family, that you can't handle the water or whatever? But yeah, if Anarion was either, she was trying to save Anarion from drowning or something. But yeah, that isn't, like I said, I didn't have a chance to go back and rewatch the whole season yet, but that is kind of one of those dangling threads out there that hopefully they kind of start to bring stuff into the show.
And more. This was another original character. Our Farazan's son. What was his name?
Oh yeah, he was kind of the. Yeah.
He was beginning a relationship with Isildur and Anarion's sister.
Yeah, that's right, and he was kind of a little bit shady, and
that's why I'm like, I want to see more of this guy, because he's kind of this shady character, and you get the feeling that he resents being under his father's shadow.
Yeah, Numenor was just the whole culture of that island is just really interesting, and like Farazan has to be like he's kind of a representative to all these guilds and different things.
He has all the guilds crests.
Yeah. So he's kind of like teaching his son about there might have been a line of something like he's more powerful than the king, or it's like it's more important to be liked by the people or something.
Yeah.
And because they're the ones that give you power. I could be making that up. It could be. No,
I think that's generally like a sentiment that he expressed.
Yeah. And it could be transposing that from House of the Dragon, which is.
I was about to say, it sounds like that riddle from Game of Thrones, where it's like the power resides where men, decide it does or something. But it sounded like that. So.
Yeah.
But will we see more of the guy who thinks elves are going to take his job?
Oh yeah.
I did like that scene though, because it would everyone's like, the speech was so stupid. I'm like, of course it was, because Farazan obviously put that guy up to it. He shakes his hand later and gives him a glass of booze. So it's so Farazan can come in, give the much more eloquent and obviously better speech, and then everyone loves him. I'm like, you want your opening act to be not as good as the main attraction. So he gets this guy to come up and say, elves will take our jobs and all that stuff. Like, political rabble rousing isn't supposed to be like, make sense or be eloquent or whatnot. People got so upset by that, and I was just like, whatever.
Yeah. What about you, Mike? Any big speculations or anything you want to go on record here? And
gosh, I have to make a prediction.
Call your shot.
I thought you just like something I wanted to see, because
I know that's good for it.
And I already mentioned this, but the scene where it reminded me very much of, and I think it's supposed to be resonant to the when the men receive the 9 rings, and there's one of them kind of holding it. And I remember there's this like cut scene in Lord of the Rings video game where like Sauron creates the Nazgul, or creates, does that sound familiar? You kind of,
is that from the Shadow of Mordor games?
I can't remember, but
okay.
The idea of like, okay, that's obviously like they come into the Lord of the Rings story as these like pre-prepared things, right? Like they're the boogeyman in the closet, but you don't ever see but they just say, oh, but they were men once, right? And so seeing that corruption, again, it reminds me of the really big, interesting ideas that when I read the Silmarillion, I got so interested in. And obviously, because it's the corruption of men, right? It's gonna include a lot of Tolkien's sort of Catholic theology into it. And so that would be a really cool thing or interesting thing to watch if they're gonna show some of that this season. Which, like I said, just based off of that one image, it wouldn't surprise me if there's maybe some piece to that. Maybe they won't go as far. Maybe that'll be a season 3 thing or something. But if they show that kind of first step, it'll be Augustine stealing the pear. But for them, what's it going to be for these kings, or for these kings?
Tolkien does reference Augustine stealing the pear in the New Shadow.
Oh yeah,
yeah. It's apples in the New Shadow, but when the two of the characters are having a philosophical discussion, they reference a similar sequence of events. And I'm like, Tolkien, you took that almost word for word from Augustine.
It'll be that honestly would be like, and obviously it doesn't have to be that close of an analog, but if he can sort of like convince them to do something bad for the sake of doing something bad, which obviously that's the whole point of the pear story in the Augustine Confessions. And so like, if there can be that moment, then that's going to be when the switch sort of turns for that guy, and Sauron's going to know like, oh, I've got you now, kind of thing, right? So like that would be an interesting like if they illustrated that idea in some way.
Yeah,
the Nazgul like just goes up and kicks a puppy or something.
Well, and
just for the sake of doing it,
that is everybody. I remember I rolled my eyes about the comic relief in the trilogy, in the Peter Jackson trilogy, and then I'm thinking like, I don't know, maybe do I have a different attitude now? Do I want to see more of that, or am I just like I said, is this just kind of trolling where it's like I just want to see the real fans, tear their eyes out because they can't watch it anymore. Maybe that's part of it too. But
well, speaking of stealing fruit, I know, and whenever we see Isildur's mission to save the tree, I've just had in my head of like he's trying to go up the mountain, and the Mission Impossible theme starts playing, and as he's going, and so if they do that eventually, I hope someone does like a fan edit where they put that music in. Over that, because that is we're not talking about the Akalabeth tonight, but that is a pretty cool scene where he saves the tree, or saves the fruit of the tree to as they're fleeing Numenor. So but awesome. Well, any other thoughts on this teaser, or Rings of Power season 2, or future speculation?
Just that if you haven't seen the behind the scenes stuff yet, and you're not afraid of spoilers, watch it. There's some neat stuff in it, including a certain non-vertebrate evil character in the background. In you can see in a storyboard something that's obviously going to be part of Isildur's story.
Awesome. Anything for you, Mike?
No, I think that's, yeah.
All right.
I'm just kind of ready. Well, obviously I'll watch like the next trailer and stuff and get a little bit more detail, but yeah, I'm like you, Jeff. I want to go back into maybe not the final, because I've seen the final episode of season 1, but like maybe a couple of those middle ones where either I wasn't paying as close of attention, or maybe I even fell asleep to or something, which sounds bad, but I'm a guy with a lot of kids, so I was just maybe tired that night. But rewatching some of those to maybe shore up some of the details, getting ready for season 2 as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I definitely plan on rewatching myself, but Well, that is it for this episode of The Secrets of Middle-earth. We'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make this show possible, including Julia W., Karen M., Isaac K., Bennett G., and Tara H. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give help us to continue to create The Secrets of Middle-earth and all the shows at StarQuest. Now we'd love to hear from you, our listeners. What are your predictions for Rings of Power Season 2? You can let us know on our Facebook page or on Twitter, or by sending an email to middleearth@sqpn.com, by leaving us a comment on YouTube, or by visiting our channel in the StarQuest Discord community at sqpn.com/discord. So join us next time for another adventure in the world of Middle-earth. And until then, thank you, Thomas, for joining and sharing the secrets of Middle-earth.
Thank you, Jeff. This was great.
And thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
And once again, I'm Jeff Haecker. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Middle-earth on StarQuest.
Here's another show on the StarQuest network you're sure to enjoy. The Secrets of Technology. Find it wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/technology.